Hey there. I hope you're enjoying these stories as much as I'm enjoying getting these stories to you. And if you are, please subscribe. It allows you to know when a new story's out and allows me to get more subscribers. So please subscribe. Also share. Share this with your friends. Share it on media. Just a post. Well, that'd be great. Please subscribe. Please share.
The air was crisp, carrying that faint promise of warmth that only early spring can muster. My hands, rough from a winter of neglect, dug into the cool, damp earth surrounding my modest home. It was the kind of place you drive past without a second glance, squat, unassuming, with a yard that hadn't seen proper care in years. I'd moved here last fall, chasing solitude after a life that had grown too loud. Now, with the thaw setting in, I figured it was time to make the place mine. The yard was a mess, overgrown weeds, tangled roots, and patches of dirt that looked more like scars than soil. I wanted flowers, something bright to break the monotony. That's where it all began. I started early, the sun barely cresting the horizon. My shovel bit into the ground, turning over clumps of earth that smelled faintly of decay. The plan was simple: clear the weeds, loosen the soil, and plant rows of marigolds and lavender along the front path. I'd bought the seeds on a whim from a roadside stand, drawn to their vibrant packets and the old woman's insistence that they'd thrive like nothing else. Her smile had been odd, too wide maybe, but I brushed it off. People out here were eccentric. By noon, I'd cleared half the yard. Sweat stung my eyes as I knelt to work a stubborn root free. My fingers brushed something smooth, colder than the dirt around it. I dug deeper, curious, and pulled out a small carved stone, bigger than a softball. It was etched with symbols of flowers and vines. They seemed to twist and grow when I stared too long. It felt heavy, not just in weight but in presence, like it was watching me. I set it aside, uneasy, and went back to work. The yard wasn't going to clean itself. The first seeds went into the ground that afternoon. I pressed them into neat rows, imagining bursts of orange and purple come summer. The soil seemed eager, almost too soft, swallowing the seeds with a faint, wet sound. I shook off the thought, dirt doesn't want anything. Still, my skin prickled as I worked, like the air had thickened. The carved stone sat on the porch steps where I'd left it, catching the light in a way that made those symbols glow faintly. I told myself it was just the sun. That night I dreamed of roots. They slithered through the earth, coiling around my ankles, whispering in voices too soft to understand. I woke gasping, the bedroom dark except for a faint glow outside the window. I stumbled to the glass and saw nothing but the yard bathed in moonlight. The freshly turned soil looked wrong, though. Parts of it were lumpy, like it was pushed up from below. I didn't sleep after that. Morning brought a strange sight. Tiny green shoots had already sprouted where I'd planted the seeds. Overnight, marigolds don't grow that fast. Lavender doesn't either. I crouched beside them, half expecting some trick, a weed mimicking my plants. But they were unmistakable. Tiny, perfect leaves unfurled, their edges sharp enough to draw blood when I brushed them. I sucked the cut on my finger, tasting copper, and noticed the shoots trembling slightly, though there was no wind. I told myself it was fatigue, nothing more. The yard work continued, but the joy was gone. I hacked at weeds with a ferocity I didn't recognize, glancing at the sprouts every few minutes. They were taller by the hour, their colors too vivid. Marigolds a sickly orange, lavender veined with black. The stone on the porch seemed to watch it all. I placed it under the porch, rolling it deep to the back, hoping distance would quiet the unease gnawing at me. The flowers were already knee-high. Their stems were thick, almost fleshy, and they swayed when I passed, not with the breeze, but against it. I caught myself whispering apologies as I weeded around them, like I was afraid to offend. That night I heard scratching at the walls, soft, insistent, like fingernails on wood. I checked every room, every window, but found nothing. Outside, the flowers glowed faintly, their petals curling inward like clenched fists. I stopped sleeping. The scratching grew louder, so many scratches. It seemed like it was coming from everywhere. I'd catch glimpses of movement in the yard, shadows slipping between the flowers, too quick to follow. The next morning, I swear I saw a petal twitch, snapping shut like a mouth. I started avoiding the front path, circling wide to reach the mailbox. The flowers turned to follow me, their heads tilting in unison. Late into the day, I found a cat. A dead cat. It was half buried in the flower bed, its fur matted with dirt, eyes wide and empty. The marigolds around it were taller, their petals streaked with something dark and wet. I grabbed a shovel, meaning to dig the poor thing up, give it some dignity, but the soil clung to it, pulling back like it wasn't done. I decided that was more than enough for the day. I needed a break. I went inside, locked the doors, ate, and soon faded to sleep. This morning, I decided the strange flowers had to go. I went outside, tried to rip them out. I tore at the stems, ignoring the way they writhed under my grip, slick and warm like living things. They fought back, roots lashing at my hands, petals snapping at my skin. One caught my wrist and I felt a sting, sharp and deliberate. My blood dripped onto the soil and the flowers drank it, their colors flaring brighter. I stumbled back, heart pounding, and saw the yard for what it was. Not mine, not anymore. The flowers had claimed it, spreading beyond the beds, creeping toward the house. What I thought was a breeze was actually coming from the flowers, a chorus of whispers I could almost understand. The stone was back on the porch steps. The etchings pulsed, and when I touched it, my vision swam. I saw things, flashes of hands planting seeds under a blood-red moon, of figures dancing around a fire, their shadows stretching too long. The flowers were theirs, grown from something older than the earth I'd tilled. Blood weeped from the stone, so much that it slipped from my hands and dropped to the porch with a sickly wet thud. Now it's night. The scratching is at the door, slow and deliberate. The flowers press against the windows, their petals smearing streaks of blood. Their whispers so loud it is almost overwhelming. I run out to the shed and grab the container of gasoline. I douse the flowers and throw a match to them. The gasoline flares and their whispers turn into shrieks. The flowers retreat from the flames. Through the smoke, I grab their stems and roots and pull them from the ground. More gasoline, more flames, more smoke, more shrieks. I grab the stone and put it into the garden. The earth swallows it eagerly. The flowers use their stems and roots to lash at me as I pull and burn them. I weeded and burned and weeded and burned into the morning light. The whispers are quiet now, the flowers gone, turned to ash and smoke. The yard is mine again for now. I don't know if they'll come back, but I plan to cover the garden with cement and pavers, so it won't be easy if they try. I don't know if it was the seeds from the roadside stand or the stone with the etchings, and I have no desire to find out. If anything should ever happen to me and anyone finds this story, don't plant or bury anything on the property. Oh, and don't buy seeds from traveling roadside stands. I am not sure I got everything. Just in case, I always keep gasoline in the shed, although sometimes, I swear, I can hear them whispering.
The first warm day of spring always feels like a promise, doesn't it? Yes, after months of gray skies and frost clinging to the edges of everything, the sun finally breaks through, coaxing life back into the world. My yard, though, looked like it had been through a war. Leaves piled in soggy heaps, branches snapped from winter storms, and weeds clawing their way up through the cracks in the stone path. I grabbed my rake, gloves, and a thermos of coffee, ready to wrestle the place back into shape. The air smelled of damp earth and something sharper, like ozone after a lightning strike. I chalked it up to the season turning over, nature shaking off its sleep. The garden gnomes were the first thing I noticed. Maybe it was because I got a flyer in the mail, something about International Lawn Gnome Week. What a laugh. They'd been there when I bought the house a few years back, 6 of them, old and chipped, their painted smiles more grimace than grin. They dotted the yard like sentinels, placed at various locations like they were spread out to keep guard and watch all that went on. I'd never liked them. Their eyes, too big and too knowing, seemed to follow me when I mowed the lawn. But they came with the place, and I'd never gotten around to tossing them out. Today, though, they looked different. Their colors seemed brighter, the reds and blues almost pulsing under the morning light. I shook my head, blaming the caffeine for making me jumpy, and started raking. By noon, I'd cleared half the yard, piling leaves into black bags. Perspiration dripping off my face, and my hands ached from gripping the rake. I paused to stretch, glancing at the gnome by the mailbox. Its head was tilted slightly. Or was it? I could have sworn it had been facing the street before, not angled toward me. A trick of the light, I told myself, but my skin prickled. I walked over, intending to nudge it back into place with my boot, but when I got close, the air felt heavy, like I'd stepped into a pocket of humidity. The gnome's eyes glinted, and for a split second, I thought I saw its mouth twitch. I backed away, heart thudding. Just a statue, I reminded myself. Clay and paint, nothing more. Still, I decided to move it, get it out of sight, maybe chuck it in the shed. I bent down, wrapping my hands around its base. It was heavier than it looked, like lifting a cinder block. As I hoisted it, something cold grazed my wrist. I dropped the gnome, cursing. A thin red line bloomed on my skin, not deep, but sharp, like a paper cut. The gnome sat upright, undamaged, its smirk wider than before. I stared at it, my pulse loud in my ears. The cut hadn't come from anything obvious. No jagged edges, no thorns nearby. Just the gnome staring back. The yard felt too quiet now. No birds, no breeze, just the weight of my own breathing. I glanced at the other gnomes. The two by the rose bushes were closer together than I remembered, their pointed hats closer, almost touching. The one in the ivy seemed to have shifted forward, its hands no longer folded neatly but outstretched, fingers curled like claws. My mouth went dry. I grabbed my rake, not sure what I planned to do with it, and headed for the oak tree. The pair there stood side by side, their eyes locked on me. One held a tiny shovel, the other a pickaxe, tools I'd never noticed before. The ground around them was disturbed, clods of freshly turned dirt. I don't know why I didn't run inside then. Maybe it was stubbornness, the need to prove I wasn't losing it. Maybe it was something else, something pulling at the edges of my mind, whispering to stay. I swung the rake at the shovel-wielding gnome, aiming to knock it over. The metal tines connected with a clang, but the gnome didn't budge. Instead, the rake vibrated in my hands, sending a jolt up my arms. I stumbled back, and that's when I heard it. A low, guttural chuckle, like gravel grinding together. It came from everywhere and nowhere, seeping out of the earth itself. The gnomes were moving now. Not fast, not like in some cheap horror flick, but slow, deliberate, their limbs creaking as they shifted. The one by the mailbox dragged itself forward, its base scraping the gravel. The rosebush pair shuffled toward me, their tiny boots sinking into the soft soil. I swung the rake again, wild now, and caught one of the oak gnomes in the chest. It shattered, bits of clay flying, but the pieces didn't stay spread. They twitched and moved toward one another, piling onto one another. Reassembling. Yes, reassembling. Tiny hands reached for my legs, and I kicked them away, my boots crunching against their dense clay bodies. I ran for the shed, thinking I could barricade myself, maybe grab the shovel or the hedge clippers. The door was stuck, swollen from the winter damp. I yanked at it, glancing over my shoulder. The gnomes were closing in, their movements jerky but relentless. The ivy gnome was fastest, its eyes glowing a sickly green, like swamp gas. It held something in its hands now, a bundle of roots, writhing like snakes. I slammed my shoulder into the shed door, and it gave way just as the gnome lunged. I stumbled inside, slamming the door shut and wedging it locked with a piece of wood. The shed was dark, the air thick with the smell of oil and mildew. I fumbled for the light switch, my hands shaking. The bulb flickered on, casting long shadows. I grabbed the shovel, its weight reassuring in my hands, and listened. Scraping sounds came from outside, like nails on wood. Then, a voice, not human, but close, a parody of speech. "Stay out," it rasped, the words slithering through the cracks in the walls. "No trespassing." I don't know how long I stood there, clutching the shovel, waiting for the door to give. Hours passed. The sounds stopped eventually, but I didn't trust it. When I finally cracked the door open, the yard was empty. No gnomes, no disturbed earth, just the bags of leaves I'd left behind. The sun was setting, painting the sky a bruised purple. I stepped out, shovel still in hand, scanning every shadow. The mailbox stood alone. The rose bushes were bare, and the oak loomed silent. I cautiously made my way to the house, locked the door to the backyard, closed the shades, pulled the curtains. I wanted to call somebody for help, but who would believe me? As the night grew darker, I told myself it was over. As long as I listened to their warning, I wouldn't go into the backyard, and hopefully they would leave me alone. I didn't sleep. Every creak of the house, every rustle outside, had me gripping the shovel I'd brought inside. The next morning, I scoured the yard. No sign of the gnomes, not a chip of paint, not a footprint. I don't go into the yard anymore. I keep the blinds shut, the curtains drawn, and the doors locked. But at night, I hear them, scraping, chuckling, whispering my name. They're out there. Tonight is the last night of International Lawn Gnome Week. I just have to make it through to tomorrow. One more night, I hope. But wait, I just noticed. Small footprints of tracked dirt in the kitchen, from and to the back door. Are they in the house? Come on, just one more night.
The rake clawed through the damp earth, pulling up weeds and matted grass that had sprouted wild in the backyard. I'd moved into this creaking Victorian on the edge of town just weeks ago, a fixer-upper nobody else wanted. Spring was in full swing, the air thick with the scent of blooming lilacs and fresh mud, but the yard was a mess, overgrown, tangled, and dotted with puddles from April's endless rain. I figured a day of hard work would tame it. I didn't expect to unearth something I shouldn't have. Something that would make me question everything I thought I knew. I'm a nurse, grounded in stitches and broken bones, not ghost stories or curses. But as I raked near the gnarled oak in the corner, I got snagged on something solid. Kneeling, I brushed away dirt and found a small stone figure, carved into a crude human shape, with hollowed-out eyes and a wide, lipless mouth. It was heavy, unnaturally so, like it held more than stone should. I turned it over, no marks, no clues, just cold, smooth surface. Odd, but not worth dwelling on. I tossed it aside and kept going. 15 minutes later, I found another, buried a few feet away, then a third, nestled in a tangle of roots. By the time I dug up 7, the sun was climbing higher, warming the damp lawn. I lined them up on the porch steps, their eyeless faces staring out, unblinking. They weren't just creepy. They resonated faintly when I touched them, a vibration that crawled up my arm. I shook it off, telling myself they were relics of some eccentric gardener. Still, my stomach knotted. I ducked inside for water, craving a break from the weirdness. The house was too still, every creak louder than it should have been. Glancing out the kitchen window, I froze. The idols weren't on the steps anymore. They were back in the yard, half buried exactly where I'd found them. I rubbed my eyes. Heart thudding, but the scene didn't change. Grabbing a flashlight, useless in daylight, but it was heavy, and I felt I needed something heavy. I marched outside. I dug one up again, its weight familiar, its stare accusing. The air turned sharp, and a faint hiss, like wind through wet branches, brushed my ears. I dropped the thing and bolted inside, locking the door. Night fell, but sleep was a lost cause. Those hollow faces haunted me, flashing every time I shut my eyes. Around midnight, scratching started at the back door. Slow, deliberate. I swear it was like stone scraping wood. I grabbed the baseball bat from beside the bed and crept downstairs. The noise stopped when I flicked on the porch light, but there they were, 7 idols, neatly aligned on the steps again. I didn't touch them. I couldn't. Dawn brought no relief. I called a friend who knew local lore, hoping for answers. They laughed until I mentioned the house. That place, they said, voice tightening. The old owners were into some weird stuff. Cult rituals back in the 80s. Cops broke it up, but folks still whisper about it. They promised to come by, but hours passed. Maybe they changed their mind. I wasn't waiting. I needed to know. At the library, I pored over old records. Most were mundane, tax rolls, crop yields, but one article from 1983 stopped me cold. Local couple arrested for occult practices. The grainy photo showed my house, police tape strung across the porch. The couple, Margaret and Elias Crane, had been caught performing blood rituals in the woods, also mentioning stone idols that must have been stolen from the property after the Cranes were arrested. My pulse raced. The Cranes died in jail, and their house, my house, sat empty until I came along. I ate out and returned home in the early evening. The idols were in the yard again, arranged in a circle under the oak. They appeared more rudimentary now, and a fog made it look as though there was smoke from a fire. Maybe it had been a fire. The night air felt wrong, heavy, with that faint resonance. I grabbed a shovel ready to smash them, but the ground pulsed, a low, angry throb that shook my bones. The idol's eyes glowed faintly, a sickly red, and the resonance returned. My body could hear it. It was loud, forming words I didn't really hear, but felt. Feed us. I dropped the shovel, hands trembling, and backed away. I walked backward to the house, went inside, and locked the doors. I decided an early night with the covers over my head was the best thing to do, but first I wanted to do more research. In bed, online, I scoured forums about curses and hauntings. Most were junk, but one post hit hard, a user claiming they'd found idols like mine. They'd tried to destroy them, only to wake up scratched and drained, their home crawling with shadows. Their last post said they were fleeing, nothing since. Later into the night, the house turned hostile. Lights dimmed, though the wiring was new. My phone died, battery full, and stayed dead. I could not shake the feeling that I was being watched, the air resonating. I got dressed and moved to the living room, bat across my lap. I watched the back door. The scratching came again, slow and taunting. Then, impossible! The idols! The idols were inside, arranged in a semicircle, their stone mouths stretched wider, grinning. Every time I tried to move from the couch, they moved closer to me. If I stayed still, they stayed still. The air thickened, vibrating with cold dread. Shadows slithered on the walls. Unnatural whispers, so loud, the vibrations burrowing into my skull. Feed us. I don't remember how I made it to morning. When sunlight spilled through the window, the shadows had vanished and the idols were gone. But scratches marked my arms and I felt incredibly weak. A red haze lingered in my vision. My friend arrived, saw my face, and didn't ask questions. They helped me pack a bag and took me to the hospital. The doctor said I had extremely low levels of electrolytes and calcium and was anemic. They kept me on an IV for 2 days to replenish the quality of my blood. Even as I recuperated in the hospital, I felt the air resonating. The idols were still in that yard, waiting. I returned home with salt, herbs, holy water, and everything the internet said might break a curse. I was ready for battle. But I couldn't find the idols. They were gone. I grabbed a rake and scratched around the yard, and sure enough, I felt it snag on something, exactly where I had found the first idol. I stopped myself. I put the rake away. I decided it was best not to disturb anything this time. If they were resting again, the yard can be theirs. I am going to stay at my friend's until I sell the place. One thing is for sure, I am researching my next home very deeply before I buy it.